Hello, everybody. Jon Stewart with Cueball Carmichael. Welcome to another Thursday night edition of TruthBusters Live, bringing you the truth, not their truth. We had interesting past couple of weeks on this show coming out of the JFK assassination. And last week, one of our first installments on Jack the Ripper. But Q, what a interesting, we always like to sometimes talk about topical things that are taking place in our solar system and our lives right now. The debate yesterday, I mean, we haven't talked about it on purpose. We can save it for the show. I will make it known. I don't care if I run again for office, and I will make it known that Donald Trump winning on election night was one of the best, other than my daughters being born, and I mean that sincerely. A couple of wrestling, my first time on AWA ESPN TV, my wedding day. But when Donald Trump won that night in the stunned media, I'm not lying to you, that was one of the best nights of my life. Yesterday, for the first 15 minutes, I never laughed so hard in my life. And I'm going to flip it to you, Q, because I'm going to shut my mouth. But here's what I told a couple. Of course, I got besieged today with phone calls from Republicans and libertarians. They want my opinion and stuff like that, off the record. And I told everybody, Q, I'd like you to start off with this. Oh, this embarrassing shit show. And, we've brought down the country is in such a gutter. And how embarrassing. Well, what's embarrassing? That the smartest and the brightest, quote unquote, have been sent to Washington for 30 years and we're $27 trillion in debt. What's embarrassing as the richest country in the history of the world ever? We have black kids with no food in their stomachs going to school in Detroit, Chicago, Philly, New York. We have genocide happening on the south side and west sides of Chicago in one of the biggest police states, more guns than you could shake a stick at. Corruption is absolutely everywhere. We have a shadow government, and we listen to a handful of radicals, whether they be gays, lesbians, radical white supremacists, radical Black Lives Matter. I mean, if you're a freaking wacko and you're willing to scream and shout with a poster, you get hurt more than the person who goes to work 12 hours a day, pays their taxes, raises their kids, and plays by the rules. So any of the fucking media, and I'm sorry, I know you guys don't like me swearing on this show, but any of the media from George Stephanopoulos on Channel 7 to Mika Brzezinski with her, on MSNBC, we're in the gutter. You know what? No, yeah, this country is in the gutter, led by complete freaking morons and nincompoops in Congress for 30 years. That's the embarrassment, not two 70-year-old rich guys, interrupting each other. I'm done. Q?
No, you're exactly right. Look, the radical version of anything, whether you're a left-wing radical Democrat or whether you're right-wing extreme conservatives, whether you're some special interest group, there's the social media has given everybody a voice for their opinion. It's allowed groups of people to flock together. The most ridiculous thing that I heard in that debate was that Antifa was an idea, not an organization. I mean,
as the bricks flying through State Street shopping windows in Chicago, in my mind, in my wife's mind, as we watched TV that one night of the riot, it's an idea.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Ideas don't burn buildings. Ideas don't kill people in the street. Ideas don't destroy things. Organizations and groups of people do. That was the most ridiculous thing I heard. And you listen to the liberal controlled media and Trump was a bully and Trump was being Trump, just like he always is. Right. He's aggressive, he takes control. Biden was off on numbers, barely coherent at times, didn't even understand the question. Trump gave him a couple of lobs to help him back to the question. I mean, it was, I don't know how anybody can look at that debate and think that Joe Biden should have the nuclear launch codes. I mean, that is the scariest thing. Just not just for anybody, but for humanity. That this guy could give the DEFCON 4. I mean, I don't get it. And I understand left-wing people will say, well, Trump this and Trump that. But look, here's a real simple thing. The only white supremacist executed in the United States in the last 17 years was executed during Donald Trump's administration. That's how he feels about white supremacists. It wasn't done under Obama. It wasn't done under that 8-year administration. It was done during his. He's never, ever, ever. And in the past press in 2017, 18, 19, he's denounced white supremacists and any racist radical group. So that was just ridiculous. I mean, he says sure 3 times. He denies it. And then the liberal media runs with the ball. It was just kind of crazy.
Well, let me get your point on this. I literally had 30 phone calls today. But one of the phone calls was, somebody that I don't get along with that well. And he was like, well, Trump is not an actor. Johnny Stewart's an actor. That's why you make a good politician when you talk, which is true. I mean, I know inflection. I know timing. I know facial expressions. I know when to deliver the punchline, the I got you line. Yes. Yeah, I'm an actor, which makes me not maybe a fundraiser or successful elected, but in debates, I kick ass. Trump is not an actor. But what I told the guy is we elected a guy who wasn't a politician. He wasn't an actor. He doesn't know timing. He doesn't know punchlines. He doesn't know facial expressions from the TV show Dynasty in Dallas, and hasn't watched the Nixon movie 70 times like I have. He's not an actor. So that's what you got. You got Jack, my dad. You got Jack Stewart. You got Cueball's dad up there. Cueball's grandfather in his flannel shirt. That's what you get when you get Trump. If you want Obama, you could hire a politician again. Even Trump is not a politician, and you have to remember that. With that being said, I wish he would have let Biden talk some more, so Biden would have stumbled on himself. The old adage, when your opponent's committing suicide, don't call the ambulance, hand him a knife. So I think there could have been a couple of times where, I love that he got in 47 years. You've done, you've accomplished nothing. But yeah, you're not going to get the actor Trump, and I've been I would love to have someone on our show in the future from this. The Jon Stewart led, not me, Jon Stewart, the comedian from Comedy Central led coalition for the 9/11 first responders that are dying from these terrible lung diseases from the carcinogens of the smoke from 9/11, and the Iraqi and Afghani soldiers that are dying from this depleted uranium fire pits. And again, oh, what a shit show. It was embarrassment of the country. Our country is in the swamp. So embarrassing. No, listen to Jon Stewart for 5 minutes when he tells you we've got all the money in the world and, John Q. Public over to Iraq to fight for freedom, but we don't have any money for when he comes back to support him. And the more I heard Jon Stewart talk, Q, you had to peel me off a fucking ceiling. That's the embarrassment of this country. I'm not getting into that. I'm just giving people perspective. Not two old guys fighting. The embarrassment is money or no money to support them when they come back. And I would love to address it on the show. And I don't. Can you at least tell me if you were handling Kellyanne Fitzpatrick, Kellyanne Conway? I was her first political client. That's on record. In '96. I was her first client when she opened up her political consulting firm. I can't see that she's managing Donald right now because I think she would have told him to give Biden some leeway and let him speak and whatnot. Q, if you were managing Trump right now, knowing that he's really not going to listen to you. We're the TruthBusters. He's not going to listen to you totally. What would Cueball Carmichael tell President Trump in the next 2 weeks leading to the next debate? I mean, knowing that he's probably not going to listen to you, but what do you think you could get into his head? You're so much smarter on that kind of stuff than me. We'll give it away.
I agree with you. You just give the other guy enough rope to hang himself, because he will. Just be quiet, wait for your chance to reply, rebut, and give the guy enough rope. He'll hang himself. You know, he's 47 years and he's done nothing. I mean, his record speaks for itself. Just let him hang himself. But look, before we go too far down the political road, tonight's a pretty exciting show. We're going to cover an area very close to you that not a lot of people know about, called the Michigan Triangle. And it's extremely interesting, folks. If you don't know about it, there's a lot of interesting facts. Two key facts is the location of the triangle, and then in the one shallow end of the lake, because it's a really big, deep lake. It's the deepest of the Great Lakes at over 637 feet that they know. But there's an underwater rock formation that is nearly identical to Stonehenge in England, including the circles in the orbit of the planets and the equinox. And so what I've asked Nick to do is to really quick throw up the location of the triangle and the picture of Stonehenge. It's going to show the circle. Those little spots you see are the actual placement of the stones. And if you would throw that up on a screen real quick for everybody so they can take a look at that, that would be awesome, so they kind of know what we're talking about.
We have graphics tonight, Q.
I know we do.
Very professional. What's next? Uniforms? You were thinking about it, Nick? Okay.
Uniforms would be fantastic. So what this is going to show you, it's going to show you upper left-hand corner. It's going to show you the area of the triangle. Okay. And that lower right corner is actually in the lower left shallow end of the lake. That circle is the outside circle, and those little things that you see that are little kind of bluish squares in it are the position of the stones, which almost are a perfect identical duplicate of Stonehenge in England. It was built obviously a while ago, as was Stonehenge. But if you look at this triangle, John, you're probably extremely familiar with the area that we're talking about in the triangle, being from up that way. So, the triangle itself covers Lake Michigan, which again is one of the deepest points of the lake. And the triangle southern point is Benton Harbor, Michigan.
Well, I got it now.
From one side, it extends north to Ludington, Michigan, and the other crosses to Lake Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Thank you. I knew you'd know that better than me.
The town of Making of a Murderer. Stephen Avery is from Manitowoc. Yes, sir.
No kidding.
And you want to talk about a weirdo? Well, okay. I have an employer there is from hearsay, there's a lot of weird stuff that has happened allegedly in Manitowoc. There, I covered my butt.
Yeah.
Just leave it at that.
There's a lot of weird things. There's the schooner, the Thomas Hume, that set sail across Lake Michigan with a load of lumber. A ship never reached its destination. Despite it being made of wood, carrying wood, not one debris from the schooner or the load of wood was ever seen or found.
That is weird.
Now, here you have a wooden boat that if it breaks up, it's going to float.
Right.
If you a load of lumber, which if it comes off, it's going to float. Right. And it is, at the time in 1891 when it sunk, a massive ship, a football field in length. And yet not one piece of it ever floated up anywhere. And look, we're not talking about the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean. We're talking about a big body of water, but we're still talking about a lake that has residents around the entire shore. Somebody would have seen something. So this goes into almost, John, if you will, the Alaska Triangle, where things don't just crash, flip over, burn, or do anything else. They disappear completely.
Yeah.
People, planes, boats with zero trace ever. I think we go back to two things: magnetic anomalies. But I think we also have to go back, just like we did in the triangle, of why do things and people completely disappear off the face of the earth? Is it a parallel universe? Is it a portal? Or is it an abduction? And that's really the thing that kind of brings everything together in another very similar national parks that we covered, the Alaska Triangle, and now we're in the Michigan Triangle. And the most interesting of all to me is this one, and then I'm gonna let you go, John. Let you go talk. Here's a story of a captain that vanished from a locked cabin.
Yeah, tell me about this. Okay, go ahead.
Well, Captain George Donner is his name, and what happened? It's the most perplexing case really associated with the Lake Michigan Triangle. Okay. On the evening of April 28, 1937, Captain Donner guided his ship through the chilly Michigan waters before retiring to his cabin for the night.
Okay.
3 hours later, a crewman went to wake the captain to let him know they were approaching the port. He found the cabin still locked from the inside, but the captain, once they broke the door down, was gone from the cabin. Not a portal big enough in the cabin for him to get out of into the water. But the door's locked and the captain's completely gone and disappeared. And the door's locked, might I add, from the inside, which is really bizarre. It's kind of like K-Pax with Kevin Spacey, where he goes in the room and he completely disappears.
Sure.
How does that happen out on the water? I mean, there's been some very interesting eyewitness reports of strange lights above the lake in the triangle.
Yes.
Numerous reports of unexplained strange lights above the water Lake Michigan. It's got a supernatural reputation, of course. Triangle, another thing they've noticed is sudden weather phenomenon.
This is
rogue waves in the middle of the lake. Now, I was raised on Lake Ontario. You were raised near Lake Michigan, on Lake Michigan, different parts of vacation there. Rogue waves are something that happen sometimes for no real explanation in a lake. It might not be the shifting of tectonic plates, but a rogue wave will certainly tip a small boat over. But we're talking about incredibly large ships. Also, a lot of people who see these lights and have commented on them, when they see them, it unleashes sort of a weird, odd feeling in these people. And it's been led to speculation of UFO activity over the center of the lake in the triangle. And again, some kind of inexplicable electromagnetic anomaly. What do you make of it, John? You were raised around that area. What do you think's going on?
I've had a boat on Lake Michigan back in the mid '90s, and here's you talk about hearsay, alleged, conjecture. I've been on my boat on Lake Michigan, and I remember the first thing an employee of my father's told me, who was a very seasoned Lake Michigan boater. He's like, John, I am being totally honest with you. The weather on that effing lake can turn on a dime in a nanosecond. He goes, just listen to me. The weather on Lake Michigan can turn on a dime. And so I had a boat on Lake Michigan for roughly three and a half years. I remember one time I was up near the port of Waukegan, which is about 30 minutes north of Chicago. I was very conservative boater. I never went more than like 200 or 300 yards offshore, because I always wanted to be sure that if something happened, I could swim back, to shore with a flotation device. I went down in this little cuddy cabin that I had, made myself a sandwich. I was with another a boater, and we made sandwiches and had a Coke. I mean, like literally 15 minutes. We went back up on deck. It was fog, like a movie set. It was, when they say pea soup, it was, you couldn't see 15 feet in front of you. And we just looked at each other. We were dumbfounded. I'm like, this is what, Kenny, this guy, my dad's employee, said to me and warned me. And I, you could, I don't know what it was. You could say spatial disorientation, which is why they train fighter pilots to fly in the clouds. So I'm like, God, we got to get to shore. So I'm, You got to understand, I grew up in Chicago. Lake Michigan is east. Lake Michigan is east. The lakefront is east. So I'm going east in Lake Michigan. And I'm like, don't worry, we'll be on the Chicago shoreline soon enough. And we were going 15, 20 minutes. And finally, the passenger said, woke up out of a stupor and said, wait a minute, we're on the lake. If we go east, we're going to be in, Benton Harbor.
Right. Exactly.
I'm like, oh my God, you're right. I'm like, I'm so stupid. I don't know. Again, ADD, spatial, or a lifetime of Lake Michigan's east, the shoreline is east. But that weather turned, ladies and gentlemen, on a freaking dime. And, growing up, being raised in Chicago for 53 years, knowing, thousands of boaters, people who know thousands of boaters, bars, coffee shops, you don't think Chicago is like a water town, like a Nantucket, or we are. I mean, we are lake people. You are. I mean, if, you got to be hard not to, have some kind of affinity with the lake. And I'm not going on and on. I'm just saying that I can attest that, and there was other times, Q. I remember Venetian night, which is a night where all the boats decorate themselves and they go on the lakefront. I mean, I looked on the weather maps. I looked on the weather chart. It was going to be fine. Again, only 300 feet off the shore. We were like, I'm getting tired. Okay, it's over. And it's not a trickle. It is wham. It just hits you. That thunderstorm, the thunderclap. Has not been that way where I lived, 5 miles inland from Lake Michigan, living around Chicago. It does seem to be clearly a phenomenon or an experience that is directly has a direct route to the lake itself. Does that make sense? It's you don't see this weirdness on the land. It's on Lake Michigan, and millions of stories of again. I've heard stories like me, people being confused, being disorientated. What was another story? Weird stuff. Again, like the Bermuda Triangle, electronics not working. I heard there was a private pilot one year. He was landing at the Gary Airport, and he described it as it almost like the airport disappeared and then reappeared, and he doesn't know if it's clouds or haze or it's just funky, freaky. And when you called me this week and said I want to do this topic, I got like a little chill on my back because you're talking about something I experienced. And folks, I'm not telling you this to be part of the show. And I want to, I can tell you the date, the kind of boat who was with me, what happened. It's just freaky, and it is a dangerous lake. And Q, where is this Stonehenge in the bottom? I have never heard of this. So what town is that by, or what is that on the lake? Is that on your lower Michigan side?
Lower Michigan side, and it's actually in less than 20 feet of water.
Yeah,
but it was only discovered a few years ago. John, I don't know if you remember this, but this goes back to our friendship even before we were business partners. One time you posted something on Facebook about the booms coming from the lake. Yes. And I answered you and I said it's called the Great Lake Cannons. They actually call them Seneca Cannons, exactly. And it's common to the Great Lakes along with a lot of smaller seas like the Sea of Japan and things like that. And scientists really aren't 100% positive of what causes them. They think that the Earth gets built up with gas underneath the lake, and that pocket of gas explodes. But if anybody's ever heard the Seneca Cannons, real common on Seneca Lake, the Finger Lakes where I live, I was right at the tip of Cuga, but also close to Seneca.
Right.
These booms were almost something you heard from your home, 15 times a year. And we used to, and I think that term came from hearing them so much on Seneca Lake. The Finger Lakes are in very deep valleys. They were cut by glaciers. The Finger Lakes are also in deep valleys, and they were cut by glaciers. But the Finger Lakes, you'll be on a hill. Literally, it's a mile down to the lake. I mean, it's so steep, and so they call them skyquakes. This is what they attribute it to, is the Earth releasing a large pocket of gas. But imagine if you're a ship crossing the lake, no matter how big you are, and you're over the top of that pocket of gas that gets released loud enough to create a sonic boom, very similar to in the 1960s when jets would break the sound barrier, but they weren't high enough yet. They weren't flying at 35,000 feet. They were 20,000 feet. So when they would break the sound barrier, you would hear a boom that would shake your house. We live close to an airport, and we would hear that. But these Seneca guns, very common occurrence over the Finger Lakes, the Great Lakes, Sea of Japan, smaller seas, big lakes, and possibly skyquakes, which is an explosion of gas, either coming from under the lake or from the clouds itself. Now, I don't know how a cloud can cause a massive boom, but I do know from my time in the paranormal world, which I don't advertise very much, but spent a lot of my youth involved in that, come from a family of mediums and psychics, have owned quietly a company called Coastal Carolina Paranormal since 2010. And I don't talk about doing investigations ever on YouTube or Facebook or anything. That's something I kind of do privately. But I also know that in certain homes that are reputed are said to be haunted, a lot of times there are very large booms that shake the entire house. So I've always associated those booms in homes that have unusual activity to an actual portal opening. Let's take that to a bigger field of play. A lake, a Great Lake, a Finger Lake, a large boom, an area of the lake where a lot of lights have been observed in the sky. Not only that, but there's really a sort of a big case related to Lake Michigan. It happened in 1950, and it was a Northwest flight, 2501, and it was headed from New York's LaGuardia Airport to Seattle. Well, in those days, they flew directly over Lake Michigan to get from New York to Seattle. So this flight is over Minneapolis for a brief layover in Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. It takes off right before it goes over Lake Michigan, which is about 18 miles north of Benton Harbor. The pilot reported to have encountered a strong electrical storm. He asked permission to descend to 2,500 feet to get below that electrical storm. Keep in mind, 1950, you're not flying a jet. You don't fly at 35,000 feet. You fly at 3,500 feet. So he asked for permission to descend to 2,500 feet. Permission was denied. Within seconds, the plane disappears off radar. Now, he's at 3,500 feet, requesting to drop to 1,000 feet. The plane completely disappears. At the time that it disappears, 2 police officers report seeing a bright red light hovering over Lake Michigan. They observed the light in a stationary position for over 10 straight minutes at almost exactly the same time that this flight 2501 Northwest Orient Air, flying out of LaGuardia, stop in St. Paul, take off 18 miles later, it's over, right over the triangle. It disappears at the time when these guys see the police officers, now not just average citizens, people are trained to observe, see this light hover over the lake for a straight 10 minutes. I want you all to think about that. We're going to go pay some bills and go to break. When we come back, I'm going to get John's opinion on that exact situation. Stick with us. We'll be right back. So we're back, and thanks for sticking with us here on TruthBusters. Just remember, you're going to get not their truth, but the truth on everything. Tonight we're talking about the mysterious Michigan Triangle. It goes back almost 300 years. Jon Stewart lives practically on the lake. He's been all over that lake in his entire life. He's been up and down the lake, across the lake, in Wisconsin, Michigan, everywhere on the lake. So he knows more about that lake than any of us on the show. Nick is in his lockdown bunker in St. John's, Canada, and I'm in the lockdown bunker in eastern North Carolina. Jon is not locked down. He's viewing the lake right now. Well, actually, he's viewing the camera. The lake's in the background. But anyway, he's pretty close. What do you think about that flight? And the police officers happened to call in a call of seeing an object, bright orange object, sitting in one spot, hovering over the lake for 10 straight minutes, nearly at the exact time the plane disappears. And by the way, they never found one trace of that plane, one person, one flotation device, one seat cushion, nothing.
Yeah, there is let me. I don't have a lot to say about the plane incident, but what I would like to start with is I think there is a. I'm trying to think of the best word. I think there's some facts that we, as Americans or people in the world, citizens of this planet, and I'm not going off on a melodramatic Sermon on the Mount. I think there is some facts we need to start facing as members of this planet, and certainly on this show, is that the ignoring the repetitive, there's same repetitive story over and over and over again around the world, different continents. Mark Twain said something. History might not repeat itself, but sure the hell does rhyme. And I think we need to come, and I am being philosophical right now, but I'm being deadly serious. I think we need to come to the realization and to the facts queue that you can't ignore pyramids being built 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 years ago by different people, different cultures on different continents who could never meet each other. You can't ignore that anymore. You can't ignore that a humble peasant just trying to feed his family in Tibet sees the same hairy, bipedal, upright creature with the same smell, the same howl, as his brother and cousin, as a lumberjack logger in the Pacific Northwest. And for 500, 600, 700 years. You can't ignore this anymore. We can't ignore the same, and just let me finish here. If anybody's, oh God, he's going off. You can't ignore the fact of the same damn identical story by people who never met on different continents. Once again, people that never met different continents, the same story, the same description, the same instruments, the same verbiage of alien abductions. It's the same. None of the stories are different. They tell you there's a creator God. They tell you don't blow up the planet. We want to get some, samples of your semen and your ovaries, and we show you hybridization babies. You're floating in air. You lose track of it's the same damn story. So I will end my thesis there. My thesis statement there. And when I look at Lake Michigan, it's the same damn story. It's the same. When you blew my mind. I did not read this bubbling gas. Well, let me tell you something, folks. Have you seen any of the Bermuda Triangle documentaries in the past 3 or 4 years? That is like getting to be the top now theory. One of them of the Bermuda Triangle is this: it's on a natural gas bed, and when that natural gas or whatever gas bubbles to the surface, it's less dense than the water, and the ship just sinks through it. And so here our co-host tells us this. We did not talk about this, folks.
No.
I swear to God on my children. And here he is talking about the same goddamn aspect of the Bermuda Triangle, the triangle in China, the triangle in Alaska. No wreckage. Disappears off the screen. Weird lights. Weird weather. Have you seen a Bermuda Triangle documentary? Same damn thing. The pilot in the 70s that saw green clouds. Why would he lie about that? So I think, Q, that we just have to start, just coming face to face with the facts that Mark Twain's right. History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And this rhyme's been going on for 8,000 years. And I don't know if it's aliens. I don't know if all of it is aliens or all of it is weather. All of it is geologically related. Or if all of that is the same, because it's certainly, you could find a lot of stories of UFOs and geologic changes and whatnot. And I think that we need to make the statement that, it's just time you throw up your hands in the air. And that this world has similar instances involving aliens, geologic instances, weather-related instances, biological, animal-related instances that we're all having, all the people on different planets, different continents, different cities, different states, we're all having either we're all nuts and having mass hallucination, which is impossible, or we live in a really interesting world. And I'm not dismissing our topic today, but what you just described, Q, for the first 10 minutes of your talk, you might as well have been talking about the Bermuda Triangle.
People would know the difference if we hadn't led to the geography. I'll tell you what the most amazing thing is, I think, is when they discovered this underwater Stonehenge, they decided not to disturb anything because they wanted to date it, and the rocks are thousands of years old. But right. What was really interesting is in a large egg-shaped rock that weighed approximately 20 tons, there's a carving of a mastodon in that rock. Mastodon disappeared off the face of Earth 10,000 years ago is the last mastodon. So somebody saw this mastodon and said, hey, let me carve it in a rock, because all those years ago, the only way of recording historical events was to carve it in a rock, paint it in a cave, carve it on a canyon wall, put it somewhere so that history knew you saw what you saw. It's an amazing thing. There's another incident on Lake Michigan in the Triangle. And before I get into that, it's called the Rosabelle. I want to let people know something. John and I, as Nick and I do on the wrestling show, is we've always tried to keep conversations organic. And that may be why they're interesting and entertaining. John and I spoke for about 45 seconds this afternoon about business proposition, nothing to do with the show. And at 5 o'clock, John texts me. He goes, what do you want to cover tonight? And one of us always has something. I said, how about the Michigan Triangle? That's pretty interesting, and it's close to you. So at 5 o'clock today, we decided on the topic of conversation for tonight's show. Now, with the JFK, we had led into that. We had planned on doing that for weeks. But a lot of these shows are one-off that we decide late in the day, and Nick and I'll do that too with the wrestling show. And then we to discuss it via text or on the phone. And the reason that we like to do that is, guys, it keeps the conversation 100% organic. It's just like the difference of going in the back and walking everything through a wrestling match or going out and calling it in the ring. If you call it in the ring, you work off the crowd. That's an organic match. That's what we're trying to do here. So I want to tell you about the Rosabelle. This was a ship that was found overturned in Benton Harbor. It was boarded Benton Harbor. The Rosabelle, 1921. A few days after it went, and it was supposed to cruise the lake. It was going to take people out on the lake. It was had a few people in it. The ship sailed out and it disappeared. Now, they found the Rosabelle. There was 11 people on the ship at the time. They find the Rosabelle. There were bodies of 11 people on the ship that were still on the ship. The ship did flip over completely, but there was a massive damage to the hull, like it had rammed another ship. The only problem is there were no other ships on the lake at the time the Rosabelle was out there. No other ship was listed as going out. No other ship left the harbor. No other ship was listed as lost. Yet here's this massive ship, the Rosabelle. It's out there. It's flipped completely upside down. The hull is damaged so badly that the impact of whatever hit it would have flipped it over. All 11 bodies are still in the ship. Nothing's disturbed except it's upside down, but the hull is just crushed. Yet there's no other ships missing. It looked like a ship-to-ship collision. No other ships left any harbors. No other ships were on the lake at the time. No other ships were listed as lost. But here's a ship flipped upside down. The people killed in it, never taken out of the ship, and the ship has incredibly massive damage to the hull. Now, you think about it for a minute of what we talked about, the Seneca cannons. We talked about the underwater release of gas. I want you to think how massive, both here in the Michigan Triangle, but also in the Bermuda Triangle, how massive these pockets of gas could be. I mean, you're talking, you have 100 billion, cubic meters of natural gas explode out of the floor of an ocean.
Huge.
It's going to tip over. It's going to tip over an aircraft carrier. It's going to tip an aircraft carrier over. So think about these small ships that completely disappear. I mean, it really blows me away that a wooden ship carrying lumber across the lake disappears in this triangle, and they don't find one board ever from the ship. Could it have been hit so hard it pulverized everything into toothpicks, or was it complete? Did it completely disappear? My suspicion is that particular ship disappeared.
Right.
What about the U.S. Orient or the Orient Airlines flight? What happened to that? What happened to the flight that completely disappeared as the two policemen observed a hovering orange light over the lake for 10 straight minutes? The captain that vanished from his locked cabin from the inside. I mean, this is kind of crazy stuff. And if you have any idea on what it might be, we'd like you to add a comment. We also like to remind you to do us a favor. Go over to TripleTRadio, one word, space live on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube. We've got a great contest coming up for both shows. If you go to TripleTRadio, one word, space live on YouTube, you can find us. You can find both TruthBusters and Turnbuckles, Trunks and Titles over there. And we'd like you to go over. We're going to have a contest coming up pretty soon. Make sure that you hit like and subscribe over there and tell us what you want to talk about on both shows, because we're taking input. But John, back to you. I mean, the idea of an egg-shaped rock weighing 20 tons submerged in the water for approximately 12,700 years.
You have no idea what you're touching on. Graham Hancock, he wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, Magicians of the Gods. He has got this theory, this reporter that has turned into into like this geologic mastermind that is ripping science to shreds. And he's got this theory of a comet impact 12,500 years ago at the Younger Dryas period. And he is slowly chipping away at these scientists that, don't want to feel that there was a massive deluge, a worldwide deluge. I'm not even talking about the Noah flood. And here you go tell me that this egg, which they're finding stone eggs all over Greece, Santorini, which was another, they think, eruption where possibly Atlantis was, where the tidal wave and tsunami. And so here you go telling me about a Stonehenge that is submerged, that was once on land, that disappeared 12,005 years ago, that's going into another topic on another show. I'm like in heaven right now. Honest to God, I am so marking out right now because we need to tell Graham Hancock about this if he hasn't heard it, because this is another evidence of science truth, other than the real truth. But getting back to the lake, I would say that again, when you have water, you have machinery, you have geological, occurrences that we still don't understand yet. Yes, 50 to 60%, I'm going to chalk it off to, just what it is. When you start to have lights, when you start to have disorientation, when you start to have weirdness, I don't feel weird at an auto auction, but sometimes I felt weird on Lake Michigan. So I'm able to discern something is not right in my thinking. We're going to go to a real quick break. Nick, is that right? We need to go to another break. Real quick break. We'll be back in a few seconds. TruthBusters Live's Thursday edition. Stay with us. And we're back, TruthBusters, Thursday night edition. A few statistics on Lake Michigan. If you think like this is like your average lake in Oklahoma or, even the Ozarks, Lake Michigan, 307 miles long. 307 miles long, 118 miles wide. Average depth is 279 feet. The deepest part measured at 923 feet. That is one that I would think that would take the Gulf of Mexico. That's giving the Gulf of Mexico a run for the money.
It is. I think it's actually the average depth is. I'm sure Lake Erie, for example, is a very shallow lake. It doesn't have the depth.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah, Lake Erie is a very shallow, stony lake. Ontario is pretty deep, but Michigan, Huron, and Superior are all three incredibly big. Big lakes and deep lakes. Lake Michigan, even though it's third in size, is number 2 in volume of water, and that's because of its great depth. So it's number 3 in size, but number 2 in volume of water. That's pretty amazing. That's for people who live on a glorified pond that you call a lake, and I don't mean any offense, but look, right. I was in North Carolina for 11 years. I've had people take me to the lake, and I look at the lake, and I'm like, this is a pond where I'm from. Is this really a lake?
Right.
And right. But if you don't live in lake country, Finger Lakes, Great Lakes, you're hard pressed to find something this big. Imagine being halfway up the lake, so you're 153 miles about up the lake. You're going from end to end, and you're in the middle, so it's 118 miles across. So you're 59 miles from shore when you're in the middle. So it's 59 miles to either shoreline. and you're in the middle, so it's 150 miles to one end, 150 plus miles back from where you came from. That's
staggering.
People laugh at me when I tell them when I fished on Lake Ontario, you would be out for an entire day. You would never see shore except when you left and when you came back.
Right.
You wouldn't see it. It's 55 miles across. This one's 118 miles.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine.
And there's also, we talked about this, folks. We're going to have a show on this when we talk about the Wisconsin dog man and the Michigan dog man, which I find it funny. Bear with me. Wisconsin and Michigan, that I am deeply familiar for 53 years with both, are just at times some of the prettiest scenery on the planet Earth, and some of the weirdest freaking weird, meaning like nature, or occurrences, not people, nature and occurrences. Some of the weirdest states. I mean, there's books have been written about Wisconsin, just everything from ancient Phoenicians being there, Vikings being there. They think, people from Egypt in Wisconsin and mine copper in northern Michigan, cryptozoology, the Bigfoot and dogman. I mean, it's just a weird area. And Q, we've established on this show that there is a connection, whether it is our own paranormal feelings of our brain as humans, that when we're around weird places, they're that way for a reason. They're giving that vibe for a reason. And I don't think, Q, you can take us out of the show with this, get your opinion. I don't know, and I don't think you can completely scuff off the fact that this paranormal or this earthly weird vibe that people get in Wisconsin and Michigan don't have to at least some correlation to some of these disappearances. I'll let you finish this off.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And, I'll give everybody one more story. There's a story of a ship called the Mary McLean that in 1883 was sailing across Lake Michigan. They pulled into Chicago Harbor, and they had a strange story to tell everybody. They said, now, here we are, and it's the middle of the summer, and they say it starts to rain, and within minutes, it's dropping blocks of ice from the sky the size of a refrigerator. It's denting their wooden tugboat from end to end. So what they decide to do is when one lands on the top of the tugboat and breaks through the deck is they capture it and they put it in a downstairs galley. And when they get into port, it takes 6 men and a boy to help them pull a block of ice out of this boat the size of a refrigerator. In 1883, there was nothing that built ice that big. And they said literally rained this stuff the size between a cooler and a refrigerator, blocks of ice out of the sky for 30 minutes straight. That would explain some disappearances, especially for people. That's a big block.
That is a really great story.
If you're out there in a 17-foot Bayliner bow rider,
Johnny Stewart on his 19-foot Thompson. Whoa! I think that's a what do you call it? A hail the size of a igloo cooler.
Yeah, let me tell you something. That's pretty vicious. So here's what we try to get out there in the show is the fact that, look, there are things on this earth, both alive, inanimate, otherworldly, phenomenal, astrophenomenal, electromagnetical. There are things on this earth that we as people have barely scratched the surface of. Yep. When we know more about the moon and the planet Mars than we do about our own ocean, do you think if we're studying, oceanographers are studying oceans for production of kelp to feed people someday, if they're doing that in the ocean, what are they doing in the Great Lakes that don't produce that kelp? Nothing. We've just started discovering our own Great Lakes. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Yep. So I think what we're going to see with technology cameras, cell phones with cameras, with video recording as good as what we have right tonight on the show. I think the next 10 years is going to open up the world's eyes to everything from unidentified aerial phenomenon to creatures in the forest to things that happen on the Great Lakes when nobody's around and in the past hasn't had a camera. So I think it's going to be an exciting 10 years, guys. The next decade is going to tell us a lot more crazy stuff that is going on this planet than just two 70-year-old guys on stage battling out to see which one soils their depends first.
And remember, the apocalypse is not about the destruction of the world. The apocalypse, and I'm being serious here, the apocalypse is, by definition, the unveiling of truth, of truths, of wisdom, of secrets, of information that has been veiled. Apocalypse means the unveiling of secrets and truths that we have yet discovered. It's been a great show, Q. Thank you so much. Our producer, Nick London, all of our producers and interns for this show. Cueball Carmichael, I'm Jon Stewart, Nicholas London, our producer. As always, thank you so very much for taking an hour to spend it with us on TruthBusters Live, where we give you the truth, not their truth. So long, everybody. Good night.